So, hello everyone, pleasure to be here today, and thanks Mark for giving me and Josh and I the opportunity to present. It's always fun and challenging to think of what will be a fruitful topic for everyone. So, we at NPR, we've been Safran Risk users for quite some time. I want to say 5 years. We made the migration from Polaris over to Safran Risk when Polaris stopped being supported, and I'd say we're pretty satisfied customers with, I think we have 15 users in our company. So a fair number of licenses, and we keep Mark and his team busy with functionality requests all the time. That being said, when we saw Safran start advertising Safran Risk Manager, my first reaction was, that's for the quantitative guys. And, I'm a quantitative analyst, and I do the real stuff, and I don't need the touchy-feely qualitative analytical tools. So I kind of didn't pay much attention to it. So that's sort of the tee up of this presentation, as I'll call myself a previous quantitative analysis snob. I'll let Josh chime in if he thinks he is in the same boat. So that being said, Josh and I work for NPR Associates. I won't spend much time here. We've been in business since 1964. Came out of the nuclear Navy, and our roots are in energy, defense, and health and life sciences. And we're predominantly an engineering consulting firm with some management and project services consulting as well. I've been here 24 years. You can see my former life. Won't talk too much about myself here, other than that picture probably is at least 10 years old, and I chose not to have my portrait redone when they did them this year. Worked on a lot of big projects in a lot of industries, government and commercial. Much of the time it's doing independent reviews on the cost schedule risk side, but also plenty of time doing it myself in the trenches, getting earned value systems set up, building schedules, doing risk analyses. So seen a lot of good, a lot of bad, and a lot of ugly on a lot of different projects. Josh, do you want to cover yourself there?
Sure. So hi everyone, I'm Josh Wargo. Again, apologize for video capability today. As Mark mentioned, I'm on vacation with the family. I've got a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old in tow. So in the scramble for packing the travel crib and the bottles and everything else, the webcam got left behind. So hopefully those of you with kids yourselves will understand. If you're curious, I still do resemble this picture, except my hair is about a foot longer. I've been working with Sam pretty much my entire career at NPR within our project services consulting business. I was recently elevated to the chairman position for the FCOG Risk Management Task Team, and for a while, I was Sam's, I'll call it, quantitative go-to monkey. So when we needed to build a model, it usually fell to me. So I've got some pretty broad quantitative analysis proficiencies that span basically every software that's out there. If there's one that's not on that list, there's a chance that I've had some sort of exposure to it. My project experience is similar to Sam's. I've been doing a lot of support for the Department of Energy for their large capital asset and line item projects. So I get to see a very wide variety of risk management programs across the entire energy complex. And these are for very, very large, hundreds of millions of dollar plus types of projects. So I've seen the good, I've seen the bad, I've seen the ugly, I've seen the great. So that's kind of the backdrop that we're taking into this presentation.
Thank you, Josh. So as I said, quantitative snobbery here, where we think everything's got to be data driven and quantitative. Just some of the stuff we've done in the past, this first graphic here is an alternatives analysis where I use JCL scatter plots to look at 3 different alternatives for a new power plant design, and looked at the deterministic results versus the risk results using JCL 70 necklaces. This is a probabilistic cash flow showing the P90 mean and the P10 cash flows with the scatter plot for a project I just worked on for a Department of Energy project. We do things like turning risks on and off to figure out how much risk reserve should be held by the government versus the contractor. And of course the cool stuff you can do with Safran Risk with prioritization or sensitivity studies to look at individual risk contribution to contingencies, real deep into the data, going deeper down the rabbit hole. I'll call this Mark's fault because he gave Safran the capability to do scripting, and that graphics out of the Safran Risk user manual there. We actually wrote scripts in JavaScripts in Safran Risk. What we tried to do was to take a $100 million, billion-dollar multi-year project, input a cash flow profile based on a fiscal year funding for a government project, and tried to get Safran to levelize spend based on fiscal year cash flow limits within each iteration of the Monte Carlo simulation. And we have about 18 pages of JavaScript code to do it. And we did get it to work. Whether we'll actually use it on a real project or not, that, I'll leave that for another day. But, deep down in the weeds. And, if you really want to get fun, let's see if I can get this to go. Of course, it doesn't work when I have to show it, but, well, you'll have to take my word for it. This was a video that did work when I dry run this. But this is a 3D visualization of scatter plot data with the joint confidence necklace draped over it so you can find the most likely outcome at any given result using MATLAB data, right? So prior to the topic I'm about to discover, we were deep down in the quantitative weeds, right? Or the quantitative world. Then one day the phone rang, and as a consultant, working for a consulting company, when the phone rings, you answer it, and you obviously, your general response to "can you do this" is of course we can. Then you try to figure out how we're going to do it. But we got a call from a new client. They're building a kind of first of a kind power plant, which was a scale up of a new technology, and they wanted to know if we could run a risk workshop because they thought their project was in trouble. And of course we said, sure, we can do that. We do quantitative analysis, and but of course, as Josh said, we've seen all kinds of risk management plans, and we've seen all kinds of heat maps and risk mitigation strategies and pre-mitigated and post-mitigated, and we live in that world, and we can certainly help. That's what we said. So then it went from okay, we can go do a small workshop with a small group to 40 people. The CEOs are going to kick it off. The entire C-suite is going to be there. 3 days, and the vice president we're working for is pretty much staking his career with his company on this going successful. And I told my company boss that I think we caught the car, and his response was, I think you caught 2 cars, and it's been like that for about 8 months now. So of course we started figuring out what a quantitative risk process should look like. All the basic stuff that people should all know: risk breakdown structures, heat maps, qualitative assessment guidelines. We created scorecards for cost impact, schedule impact, whether it impacted the mission or the technical scope of the plant, identifying the trigger events, pre-mitigation, post-mitigation, all the stuff that you see in a typical risk management plan. And of course, how are you going to implement that? Well, we did what everybody does. Let's do it in Excel, right? So we built our Excel risk register, and like Josh said, we have hundreds of risk registers from hundreds of projects, and we see everything and what people do. And it's like, yeah, we put soup to nuts, everything in there, and we had probably, you can see how many columns we had. We're up to A, Z here with some of them hidden. And then you end up with data fields and pick lists and formulas to, score a risk based on the highest impact assessment of technical scope and schedule versus the probability. So you get your heat map, and you end up with, instructions that are that long or longer in Excel. Then we said, well, maybe we need to build risk forms, and we tried to build an access database, and we were trying to move data back and forth between access. And then, of course, any good risk program, to solve risks, you have action items to address them in your mitigation strategies. So you end up with a spreadsheet with 200 or 300 actions, and you need to shrink it to this small to be able to see what the heck's going on. And this is kind of a big aha moment for me. I'm the project manager and the lead in my company for this project for our customer. And I was unwilling to invest the mental energy to dig into this spreadsheet so I could figure out what was going on and make it useful. Like I call it the barriers to entry. Like, and we actually tried sending this out to members of the project team and, filter on column K for your name and then filter on the next column for the prioritized risks and then update it with your actions. And quickly learned that, group sending a spreadsheet to 15 people and expecting them to read it, let alone update it, is a fallacy. We did, push Excel to, I don't want to say the limits. I'm sure there's things people could do that are cooler than this, but one of the neat things we did in Excel on the bottom left here was our heat map trend. And this was really important to our customer, which is what's our risk profile when we started? And then every month, are we driving down risk? So, obviously red is the worst risks and green are the still risks, but the least worst risk. And as you close risks, we get to be hash mark green instead of solid green. So, you could see we were being effective in driving risk down, but we were still bogged down in Excel hell, I'll call it, to make the system work. And then I remembered, I don't know, a year ago or how long ago, that my friends at Safran had this cool tool called Safran Risk, and I figured, or Safran Risk Manager, and I said, maybe we should look at that. And I will let Josh handle it since he's the person doing all the fun stuff with Safran Risk Manager.
Like I said earlier, Sam's go-to technical monkey.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Sam. So as he was saying, we were working with a client who could, I'll say, realistically only support qualitative-based assessment data. When we came in, there wasn't really a risk management program at all. And I would say integrating the data that's needed for a full-blown quantitative analysis would have been a lot more effort than actual realized benefit for where the project was. So that's kind of the backdrop, I think, for this kind of qualitative space of where we're living for this specific project. I'll point out the Excel tool that we were leveraging contained a lot of quality data. We were confident in how the primary schedule risk drivers that we had identified and that were being assessed by the team, but it really was a monster of a spreadsheet. And so we started exploring Safran Risk Manager as a possible solution to simplify things. The overall goal was to get something that wouldn't alienate our own risk users, because it in effect was. At the same time, we also wanted something that would ease management and maintenance, give us better configuration and workflow control, and also expand upon some of those basic reporting capabilities that Sam had flashed up in the last slide. So what I'm going to do is just kind of highlight some of the qualitative analysis features within Safran Risk Manager that we were leveraging and that were viewed as kind of net improvements over that Excel iteration of the tool, and also were kind of flagged by our customer as things that they liked. Caveat that by saying this is not everything that Safran Risk Manager can do, and if you are curious, I would point you to Mark to get some more information, because it really is a savvy management tool. So right off the bat, one of the things that the client really liked was the enhanced visibility that you have across multiple projects. So this is just a snapshot of the project view within Safran Risk Manager. And what it does is just give you kind of macro level data for individual projects that you're entering into the system. So we were looking ahead here and thinking, hey, this project we're working on with the client, that's just one. And they've got an entire portfolio. So there's really an enterprise network, an enterprise management aspect that leveraging Safran Risk Manager could really bring some value to. This gives us the ability to see macro level risk exposure, but also provides us deep dive capability into individual projects, individual risk events. Being able to have everything in a consolidated database allows us to identify things like common cause risk drivers, and more importantly, track implementation of those mitigation actions across all of the impacted projects. So, just imagining trying to incorporate multiple projects into our Excel-based tool gives me a migraine just thinking about it. Not shown on this slide is the ability to create individual users aligned with the overall organizational breakdown structure. And those users can be customized with individual permissions in line with the project risk management plan. They can have as much or as little access as we think is necessary. So, right off the bat, as we started migrating things over and evaluating the functionality of Safran Risk Manager, we realized that this is an organizational framework that's much more navigable than we had previously. If you can go to the next slide, please, Sam. What you're seeing here, this is the risk register tool. There's not too much difference, specifically in the data, I'll call the core data, between this and what we had in Excel. We have the ability to bring all of our risk register fields from Excel into Safran Risk Manager. But the main improvement within this interface is the ease of use with the search, filter, and grouping functionality. So in the upper right-hand corner, I apologize, it's hard to see, but there's a search button, and that's a toolbar that kind of can provide keyword filtering on all of the indexed data within the risk register. There's a global filter option as well, and you can reorganize and show and hide columns with the click of a mouse, something that takes 20 clicks of the mouse in Excel. So it's a more usable general interface for trying to find, I'll say, individual risk events that may be applicable to you. You can filter in with single selections instead of multiple columns. I'll note that Excel does carry some of the same functionality, but it's harder to navigate. There was some front end effort involved with getting this risk register fully populated and migrated over, and I think that was where we were in the project evolution. We were trying to stand up a risk program right before construction was starting, which is not a place you want to be. And I'll point out that this tool is, I think, a really value-added thing to have at the risk identification phase early on. If we had this during the risk workshop, we could have set all our users up. They could have entered in their own individual risk events. We could scrub them. They're in the consolidated database. Trying to migrate everything over midstream was difficult because we still had to walk through the manual approval process for all of the risks that had already been identified. But that also speaks to the configuration control that's embedded within the system. So we have a lot more I'll call it control over the actual database and ensure that we're not changing things that don't want to be changed. Let's see. Next slide, please, Sam. This here just shows some of the dashboard reporting features that we leveraged for the project. Again, this is not reflective of every type of report that you can pull out of the software, but for the qualitative data that we were looking at, these are the ones that were applicable. You're not seeing a lot. You'll see a lot of the usual suspects. We've got our 5x5 heat map, risk scoring matrix, top 5 table, similar to a tornado chart without the plot, some bar charts for basic risk metric data. So nothing too groundbreaking, but it's important to note that these are still good tools to track, and maintaining visibility on your overall risk exposure and key drivers is important to ensure that there's visibility into those key priorities. You might not have the underlying quantitative data to identify probabilistic contributions to an overall contingency, but it's enough to keep people focused on what's important to complete the project on time. And for this specific project, schedule risk was the primary concern. The heat map feature is kind of cool. It's fully customizable. So we were able to create the color coding and scoring thresholds in line with the qualitative assessment criteria that were presented on I think it was slide 9. And one of the things that our client really liked about this dashboard is all of those data points are live linked to the individual data. So if this was live in the software instead of a screenshot, you could hover your mouse over a dot, click on the dot, and it takes you to a pop-up window right to the individual risk event. So, this is pretty emblematic of the macro view with dive down capability that we were really looking for. Next slide, please, Sam. So Safran Risk Manager was able to get us, I'll say, about 90% of what we were looking for in terms of that enhanced usability, visibility, configuration control. But because we were working with qualitative data only, we could only leverage a small portion of the built-in reporting tools. And what you're seeing on this slide is the type of trending reports that were available for qualitative inputs. And while useful, it's not the level of fidelity that we wanted to be able to report on to our client. So we could see things like open risks past the trigger date or past due actions, but not too much past that with just our 1 to 5 scoring data. And one of the key functions that we wanted to be able to report on was trending data, like Sam discussed earlier. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So in order to do that, we tried to leverage the API integration functionality of Safran Risk Manager. And for those of you who aren't familiar, API stands for Application Programming Interface. This is basically a way to integrate the data that we're carrying within the Safran Risk database into other applications like Microsoft Power BI. Power BI is a standard data visualization tool. And essentially, we can take all of the fields within Safran Risk Manager, use the API handshake, live link them to our Power BI dashboard, and ensure that we only have to build the plots that we need, and we only have to maintain our database in one location. We didn't want to create a second monster from after we had slayed the first from our monster spreadsheet. For this project, we were also leveraging Procore, which is a construction management set of tools, and that's also API enabled. So since all of these tools can basically speak the same language, we get to link all of this data together. We can build cross-cutting reports and ultimately enhance the team's ability to manage the job. Next slide, please. So these last 2 slides I have, these are just snapshots of some of the supplemental dashboards that we linked to the project through Power BI. The key features that I'll point out here are the flexibility. Is we wanted to filter out sets of risks by things like RBS category, functional area, severity level, risk owner, and be able to see the resulting trending data and the overall breakdown. So what this really allows us to do is have a quick and easy way to highlight the key risk pinch points. Where the highest number or the most critical, who owns the most critical risks on the project. In this example, we probably don't want to be Mr. Fournier because he's got 47 risks assigned to him. If I'm the manager here, I want to make sure that I'm assigning the appropriate resources available so we can start buying down these high number of risks within that functional area. I want to go to Mr. Ulavikas and make sure that he's got the management, the resources he needs, because he's got the crisis level risks. Those are the real showstoppers. So let's make sure that there's frequent enough communication.
Hey, Joshua. Hiya.
Sorry. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I've got a couple of polls that you asked me to run. Would you get questions from the audience about their interest in qualitative versus quantitative? Do you want me to run those at some point?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I thought you were going to pop them up during the talk.
Okay, that's okay. This will only take a minute. So, audience, I'm gonna launch a poll. You can't see this, Joshua and Sam. It says, which risk analysis skills are more valuable to your customer and employers, qualitative or quantitative? And so you get to select one of those. And as you sort of pop in you're super quick, guys. I'll give it about 10 more seconds for you to pop in your answer. So 1 click. So shouldn't take you guys long. When we get to around about 60% of you, I generally know.
We should have started with this one.
Yeah, it's okay. All right, I'm gonna close the. Thank you, everybody. That's very quick of you. So the results are like this. Okay, you can't see them. Nobody only does qualitative. 9% said they do a mix, but mostly on the qualitative side. 18% 50-50, the biggest category. a mix, but mostly on the quantitative side. I'm wondering if we have the audience type coming to a Safran conference might be slightly skewed for quantitative because of that.
I think there's a participant bias embedded in there, Mark.
What's that?
I said, I think that's a participant bias.
Sorry, that's what I meant to say. Yeah. What did I say? Doesn't matter. Anyway, and 12% on quantitative. So there you go. Big slant towards quantitative in the audience today. Yeah. You're amongst friends, Sam.
Josh, we're hitting the end of our slot here. So I'll let you kind of final thoughts on the API, and then I'll wrap up with lessons learned.
No, that's basically it. The next slide is just another example of the Power BI dashboard. But the key takeaway here is that the API functionality lets you have your cake with respect to the I'll call it collaborative user cloud-based database management that Safran Risk Manager allows, and also build whatever sort of tool that you need for client-specific or project-specific reporting needs. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Sam, for the closeout.
Yep. So reflections and lessons learned. The KISS principle, I think everyone knows what the last S stands for. I think this follows up on, I think it was JD who presented ahead of this, very similar themes. We were working with executive levels in our customers organization, and sending them spreadsheets and asking them to go dive in is not going to work, right? You're never going to get what you need. It's got to be easy, quick. They've got to, in a blink of an eye, know what you're asking them and make it easy for them to get you the feedback. Again, and along the same lines, as a risk professional, you're only going to be effective if you get the stakeholders to buy into what you're doing, and you need tools and simplified methods to get your data to make yourself effective. Yeah, people will respond to red next to their name if you have an effective reporting tool. I remember the first time we published our risk results, and the project manager responsible for construction said, "We have 18 crisis risks. That can't be right." And boy, that got their attention quickly. And sure enough, it drove action and change to try and get some of those red ones out of the red. Understanding your customer's key drivers. Again, I think this is probably exactly what JD said ahead of us as well. I think Josh and I both, when we started this effort, it was like, okay, we'll do a risk workshop for you, but yeah, we can't wait to do an integrated cost schedule risk analysis and show you scatter plots and how much your project's going to cost, right? That's not what our customer cares about. They care about getting this plant started safely and effectively, and driving down their risk profile to get to commercial operation. If we had Safran Risk going in, our risk workshop, I think would have been a lot better. We expect to get this opportunity with our customer to do this for our next project, and I think we're going to come in like a fine-tuned machine, ready to rock ahead of time for the next time we get to do this. Complicated analytical techniques are not always the right answer. ICSRA is great when you have the data to do it, but you can do a heck of a lot without that. And as a converted prior quantitative snob, qualitative analysis, it really can be effective. We've watched it happen on this project. We've watched it drive organizational change, focusing really hard on the key threats to the project success and really knocking down the risk profile. And as a consulting company, actually, this is my favorite story from this project, but the greatest experience I've had as a consultant in a long time was when we proposed the additional help we could offer our client, both on the engineering and the project side. Watching our customer use the risk register that we wrote for them, match it up against our proposal, and say, check, yep, that scope buys down risk. Check, yep, that scope buys down risk. So, justifying our continued engagement on the project as a risk mitigation measure was extremely valuable, powerful experience to go through. So with that, I'm done. And